Elena Cross was known in our social circles for her unwavering devotion. For me, she had turned down the advances of countless eligible bachelors, claiming she only wanted to grow old by my side. But during my proposal ceremony, her one that got away asked a single question: if I crash this wedding, would you leave with me? She answered without hesitation, yes. The moment the word left her lips, the air in the banquet hall seemed to freeze. I was kneeling on one knee, the custom diamond ring in my hand, refracting cold, blinding light under the crystal chandeliers. The gazes of the guests felt like 1,000 needles pricking my skin. My name is Caleb Sterling, a somewhat renowned architect. Today was supposed to be the culmination of 3 months of meticulous planning. Elena, my girlfriend of 5 years, we had gone from college sweethearts to successful professionals together. I thought the only thing missing between us was this ceremony, this title. I had poured everything into this proposal, booking the city's top riverside restaurant, inviting all our friends and family, wanting to give her the grandest romantic gesture. I could recite every word of the vows I was about to make. But now, the appearance of an uninvited guest and a single, breezy question had pulverized all my efforts and dignity. I knew the man, Julian Thorne, the second son of the Thorne family dynasty in New York, and the childhood neighbor Elena claimed she had long since gotten over. He stood leaning against the doorway in a flashy white suit, a cynical smile on his face, looking like he was here for a fun party rather than to destroy a life. And Elena, the look in her eyes after he spoke was something I had never seen before. It was a mix of excitement, grievance, and reckless abandon. She didn't even glance at me again. She hiked up the hem of her gown and walked, step by firm step, toward Julian. Every step felt like she was stomping on my heart. The guests began to whisper, a web of sympathy, mockery, and amusement trapping me in place. My throat felt blocked with cement. Elena reached Julian. He shot me a look of triumph and provocation, took her hand, and turned to leave. Elena. I finally found my voice, hoarse and unrecognizable. 5 years. What about our 5 years together? Elena Pod. She looked back, a trace of apology on her face, but mostly a sense of relief. Okay, love, I'm sorry. I thought I could forget him. I thought I could settle for an ordinary life. But the moment he appeared, I knew I couldn't lie to myself. Love isn't something you can settle for. Love isn't something to settle for. So, our 5 years were just you settling? Watching the undisguised adoration in her eyes for Julian, the last shred of hope in my heart shattered. The taste of blood rose in my throat. I could barely stand. Caleb, don't waste your breath on her. She's not worth it. A hand gripped my arm firmly. It was my best friend since childhood, Liam Vance. His face was flushed with rage as he pointed at their retreating figures and roared. Elena Cross. Julian Thorne. You two pieces of trash better remember this. For the humiliation you caused my brother today, I, Liam Vance, swear I will make you pay tenfold. Julian glanced back and sneered. The Vance kid? Big talk. Too bad. What are you going to pay me back with? That sister of yours who's about to be kicked off the board. He didn't spare us another look, wrapping his arm around Elena and strutting away amidst the complex gazes of the crowd. The restaurant was left with nothing but awkward silence and me, the biggest joke in the city. I felt my world collapse. The party broke up in shambles. Like a marionette with cut strings, I was dragged back to my apartment by Liam. Clang. A case of beer hit the coffee table hard. Drink. We're not sleeping until we're wasted. A woman like that isn't worth it. Liam cracked open 2 bottles and shoved one into my hand. I didn't take it. I just stared blankly at the photo of Elena and me on the wall. She was smiling like a flower, leaning into my embrace, looking so sweet, so happy. Irony. It was a cosmic irony. In what way am I not as good as Julian Thorne? I muttered, asking Liam, asking myself. You're better than him in every way. That woman is blind. Liam took a massive swig of beer, fuming. Julian is just a playboy relying on his family's dirty money. Everyone in the circle knows how messy his private life is. Elena will regret leaving with him sooner or later. Regret? I gave a miserable laugh. She was probably immersing herself in the joy of reuniting with her true love. Why would she regret anything? What was the point of my sacrifice for 5 years? For her, I turned down an offer from a top design firm in Europe. I worked myself to the bone just to give her a home here in New York. I planned her into every blueprint of my future. And in the end, all I get is I can't settle. My emotions finally broke. I grabbed the bottle from the table and chugged it. The cold liquid burned my throat, but couldn't extinguish the fire in my heart. A fire of anger, unwillingness, and the shame of being played for a fool. Liam drank with me, bottle after bottle, cursing the whole time. He cursed Elena's heartlessness, Julian's shamelessness. By midnight, we were both trashed. Liam suddenly grabbed my shoulder, his eyes bloodshot, whether from rage or alcohol I couldn't tell. "Caleb, do you want revenge? Do you want to make them regret this until their guts rot?" I looked at him through a drunken haze. "Revenge? How? I'm a joke now. The Thorne family rules this city. How we fight them?" Thorne Enterprises was a titan of industry, real estate, finance, tech. I was just a moderately successful architect. In front of them, I was an ant. "You can't fight them alone, but we can." There was a frantic ruthlessness in Liam's voice. "We? Yes, us." Liam leaned in, lowering his voice, emphasizing every word. "Julian mocked my sister for being on the verge of getting kicked off the board. Right? It's true. She's in trouble. The old fossils in the company are colluding with Thorne Enterprises to oust her from the CEO position, forcing her into a strategic marriage. And the partner Thorne Enterprises proposed is that bastard Julian." My head buzzed, and I sober up halfway. "You mean?" "My sister needs a husband. A legitimate husband to stabilize her position and shut those old men up. And you, Caleb," Liam stared dead in my eyes, "you need a platform. A platform high enough to let you stand in front of Julian Thorne and crush him under your boot." My heart rate spiked. An absurd, crazy idea arose in my mind. Are you suggesting?" "Exactly." Liam nodded vigorously, flames dancing in his eyes. "Caleb, forget that traitorous woman. Marry my sister. Be my brother-in-law." The proposal was shocking. I froze for a full 30 seconds before finding my voice. "Are you insane? That's your sister. Marriage isn't a game." Liam's sister, Victoria Vance. I had seen that name countless times in the financial news. The helm of Vance Holdings, a businesswoman known for her iron fist and intellect, dubbed the Ice Queen. She was 3 years older than me and stood at the very top of the social pyramid. Me marrying her? That was more ridiculous than running for president. "I'm not crazy. I'm very sober." Liam shook his head, the drunkenness fading from his eyes. "Caleb, do you think I'm joking? My sister is surrounded by enemies. The board is using her single status and lack of an heir to question her stability and dilute her shares. The Thorne marriage proposal is poison. If she refuses, they have an excuse to attack. She needs a contract marriage partner, someone with a clean background, capability, and absolute trustworthiness." He looked at me with intense seriousness. "In all of New York, I can't think of a second person besides you. Why me? I have nothing, and I just became the city's laughingstock. I mocked myself. Because I trust your character, because you're smart and talented, and because, right now, you hate Julian Thorne as much as I do." Liam grit his teeth. "This is a transaction, and it's also revenge. My sister helps you ascend. You help my sister survive the crisis. Only by joining forces can you completely destroy that pair of scumbags, Julian and Elena. Revenge." The word was like a poisoned dagger, stabbing precisely into the most painful part of my heart. In my mind, the scene of the proposal played on a loop. Elena's retreating back, Julian's mocking laughter, the pitying looks of the guests. The shame, the unwillingness, gnawed at my sanity like a viper. Why? Why did 5 years of genuine devotion earn me such betrayal and humiliation? Why did they get to leave in a glorious embrace while I was left alone to lick my wounds? I didn't want to be the pathetic victim anymore. I wanted them to pay. I wanted them to know that Caleb Sterling was not a doormat they could trample on. A ruthlessness I had never felt before rose from the bottom of my heart. I looked at Liam, the confusion and pain in my eyes gradually replaced by a cold determination. "Fine." I squeezed the word out through my teeth. "I'll do it. I'll meet your sister." The next afternoon, arranged by Liam, I met Victoria Vance. The meeting place was the CEO's office on the top floor of the Vance Holdings Tower. Outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows lay the most prosperous financial district of New York City. The skyscrapers were spread out beneath us. Victoria sat behind a wide ebony desk, wearing a tailored white suit, her long hair pulled back sharply. Her temperament was cold, her gaze piercing. She had even more presence than in her photos, an oppressive aura of someone accustomed to power that made it hard to look her in the eye. "Mr. Sterling, please sit." She gestured, her voice carrying the same detached chill as her demeanor. Liam gave a brief introduction and then tactfully withdrew, closing the door. In the vast office, it was just me and her. The atmosphere was oppressive. I took a deep breath to break the silence. "Ms. Vance, I assume Liam has explained the situation." Victoria nodded slightly, her gaze lingering on me for a moment as if appraising a commodity. Yes, he said you need a wife, and I need a husband. We each take what we need. Her directness surprised me. The terms of the agreement are simple. She slid a document toward me. The marriage lasts for 1 year. During this year, you're my legal husband. You must cooperate with me to attend all necessary business and family functions and play the role of the Vance son-in-law. In return, Vance Holdings will establish an independent design studio for you, inject $5 million in startup capital, and all the group's real estate projects will prioritize your studio. $5 million in capital. Priority on all Vance real estate projects. These conditions were a temptation that could skyrocket any architect's career. I only had a nod, and I would possess things I might not have achieved in 10 years of struggle. All I had to pay was 1 year of marriage. Of course, this is strictly a cooperative relationship, Victoria added. We will not interfere in each other's private lives. After the agreement expires, we will divorce amicably, and I will give you a generous severance package. Regarding assets, a prenuptial agreement has already been drafted. You have no objections? None. I shook my head. I wasn't after her money. I was after the qualification to stand in the same ring as Julian Thorne and fight. I have only one question, I said, looking at her seriously. Why did you agree to Liam's absurd proposal? Just because I'm his friend. Hearing this, Victoria looked up and met my eyes properly for the first time. Her gaze was deep, like an ancient well, betraying no emotion. Liam's recommendation is one factor. He says you're reliable, and I trust his judgment. She paused, her tone remaining flat. On the other hand, I watched the video of your proposal. My heart sank. That farce made you the city's joke, but it also showed me your value, she said faintly. Faced with such betrayal and humiliation, you didn't lose your composure. You didn't become hysterical. You just stood there quietly. In your eyes, there was pain, unwillingness, but no servility. A man who can maintain his dignity at rock bottom either has deep depths or a spine of steel. Either way, it fits my requirements. So, the pathetic state I thought I was in had become a unique value in her eyes. The feeling was strange. Most importantly, the corner of Victoria's mouth hooked into a barely perceptible arc. Our enemy is the same person, Julian Thorne, and the Thorne family behind him. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Correct. I looked at her, this calm, rational, even somewhat cold woman. I saw no actuation in her. Only clear goal, precise calculations. Collaborate was perhaps my best choice right now. I agree. I picked up the pen and signed my name on the agreement. Caleb Sterling. The moment the pen lifted, I seemed to hear the sound of my past life crashing down. And a new world, full of unknowns and challenges, was opening its doors to me. Victoria and I moved with startling speed. The day after signing the agreement, we went to City Hall to get our marriage license. Holding the document felt surreal. 2 days ago, I was preparing to propose to another woman. 2 days later, I was the legal husband of a woman I had met only once. Life is truly absurd. From today on, you move into my house, Victoria said to me as we left City Hall, her tone an unquestionable command. If we're going to put on a show, we have to do it right. The news of our marriage will leak soon. People will definitely be watching us. I nodded. Understood. Victoria's home was in the city's most exclusive enclave, a sprawling penthouse on Central Park West. It was massive, with a terrace overlooking the park. The interior was understated luxury, filled with art, revealing the owner's impeccable taste. A middle-aged housekeeper greeted us, respectfully addressing me as Mr. Sterling. Victoria pointed to a bedroom on the second floor. That is your room, separated from mine by the study. You can ask Mrs. Gable about household matters. With that, she took a call and hurriedly walked into the study, seemingly having endless business to handle. I stood in the empty living room, looking at this strange, luxurious environment, my feelings mixed. Was this the new life I had exchanged a marriage contract for? That evening, Victoria's assistant delivered a pile of items. Clothes, shoes, watches, accessories. All top-tier luxury brands, filling my new room. Ms. Vance says that from now on, your image represents the face of the Vance family. The assistant explained formulaically. I looked at the luxury goods, worth enough to buy my entire old apartment, and felt no joy, only immense pressure. It was a constant reminder of the vast difference between Victoria and me. We were simply employer and employee. That night, Liam called, his voice full of excitement. Buddy, you're awesome. You're officially my brother-in-law. How is it? My sister, the Ice Queen, she's hard to get along with, right? It's fine, I replied concisely. Ah, I knew it. By the way, good news. I've already accidentally leaked the news of your marriage. The circle is blowing up. It'll probably be the headline tomorrow. So fast. I frowned. Of course we have to be fast. Catch them off guard. Liam's tone held a vindictive pleasure. I really want to see the looks on Julian and Elena's faces when they hear this. I hung up the phone, but I didn't share Liam's excitement. I walked to the terrace and lit a cigarette. Watching the city lights below, I felt a sense of blankness. The curtain had risen on this revenge drama. But was I really ready? Early the next morning, the news of my marriage to Victoria indeed detonated across New York's financial and social scenes. Schalt, Banse Oldin Seo Victoria Vance Lopez. The groom is, from failed proposal to marrying into billions. Caleb Sterling's real-life comeback. Tenvance alliance collapse, suspicion abund. The headlines of every major news site were dominated by us. My phone was practically blowing up. Friends calling for confirmation, classmates calling for gossip, and distant relatives who used to look down on me calling to offer warm congratulations. I ignored them all and turned off my phone. The only call I took was from Elena. The moment I picked up, her voice came through, urgent and incredulous. Caleb, is the news true? You married Victoria Vance? Yes. My answer was one word, as calm as if I were talking about someone else. Silence on the other end. After a long while, Elena's voice returned, but this time, laced with accusation. Why? Didn't you say you loved me? It's been a few days, and you're married to another woman? Caleb, is this how you loved me? You're doing this to get back at me, aren't you? Revenge? I suddenly found it funny. Why did she have to question me? Elena, I said coldly. The moment you chose to leave with Julian in front of everyone, we were over. Who I marry, and how I marry, has nothing to do with you. How could you treat me like this? Her voice took on a sobbing tone. Were our 5 years of feelings fake? Do you not care at all? Care. It was as if I'd heard the world's biggest joke. The person who trampled our 5 years of feelings into the dirt and turned to throw herself into another man's arms was you, not me. Why do you have to talk to me about feelings now? She seemed choked into silence. Also, please don't call me again. My wife wouldn't be happy. I hung up immediately. My so-called wife was sitting opposite me, elegantly eating breakfast while reading the news on her tablet, her face showing no ripples of emotion, as if the protagonist in the news wasn't her. Not bad, she said, putting down the tablet and wiping her mouth with a napkin. A faint compliment. The reaction from the board must be intense, right? I asked. They've exploded, Victoria said, her tone neutral. Those old fossils started attacking in the company chat early this morning, saying my decision to marry privately was irresponsible to the company. The Thorn Group has also publicly issued a statement terminating all cooperation negotiations with us. So next, tonight, the Vance family is hosting a dinner. Consider your welcome party, and also a trap. Victoria looked at me, her eyes carrying a sharp scrutiny for the first time. The major shareholders who oppose me will all be there. They will try every method to make things difficult for you, to make you look like a fool, to prove my choice was wrong. Tonight is your debut as my husband, and also your first battle. Can you handle it? I met her gaze without flinching. Ms. Vance, since you chose me, you should trust your judgment. I answered calmly. I'll fight this battle with you. A glint of imperceptible approval flashed in Victoria's eyes. She stood up and adjusted her collar. Good. The driver will pick you up at 7 tonight. Don't embarrass me. With that, she walked out in her heels. I knew the real test was just beginning. The Vance family dinner was held at their old estate, a historic mansion in upstate New York with manicured gardens and an air of understated old money. Following Victoria's instructions, I changed into the custom suit her assistant prepared and arrived on time. The moment I stepped into the banquet hall, every eye locked onto me. There was curiosity, scrutiny, but mostly undisguised contempt and hostility. An elderly man with white hair, but a vigorous spirit sat at the head of the table, leaning on a cane. He was Arthur Caldwell, the second largest shareholder and the leader of the opposition. The people sitting around him were all veteran figures of Vance Holdings. Victoria stood by his side, her expression cold. When she saw me enter, she gave a slight nod. I walked up and greeted the elder politely. Mr. Caldwell, good evening. Caldwell didn't even lift his eyelids, just grunted in response. A heavy-set middle-aged man next to him, Director Higgins, spoke up in a sarcastic tone. Oh, so this is the son-in-law, Ms. Vance carefully selected. Mr. Sterling, right? We've heard so much about you. To go from a failed proposal to hitching a ride with our CEO so quickly. I admire your tactics. As his voice fell, A wave of suppressed, snickering rippled through the room. It was naked humiliation. They wanted to see me embarrassed, angry, losing my composure. But I didn't. I just smiled faintly, looked at Director Higgins, and spoke calmly. You flatter me, Director Higgins. Matters of the heart are subjective. Some people like leftover food past its expiration date, thinking it's a delicacy. As for me, I prefer what is fresh and valuable. After all, being with someone worthy allows one to maximize their own value. Don't you agree? My words had a double meaning. I insulted Elena and implicitly struck back at their short-sightedness. Higgins' face turned the color of raw liver. At the head of the table, Arthur Caldwell finally opened his eyes slowly. His clouded gaze landed on me. Young man, you talk big. What makes you think you're qualified to stand here, next to Victoria? Here it comes. The main topic. I looked him straight in the eye, neither humble nor arrogant. Because I can give Ms. Vance what she needs. Oh, Caldwell raised an eyebrow with interest. Tell me, what can you give her? Money? The Vance family has plenty. Power? What power can a rootless architect have? What I can bring is the future. My voice wasn't loud, but in the quiet hall, it carried weight. Everyone here is a veteran of Vance Holdings. You know better than I that while the group is massive, its core industries remain traditional manufacturing and real estate. Both industries have hit a ceiling in this era. I've noticed that the recent projects of Vance Estates have received mediocre responses. The designs are dated and lack highlights, completely failing to match the brand's high-end positioning. This is one of the dilemmas Vance Holdings faces: brand aging and a lack of innovation. My words caused a slight change in everyone's expressions. These were core company secrets, things an outsider shouldn't know. I knew because yesterday afternoon, I saw a quarterly analysis report Victoria had left on her desk. I only glanced at it, but with my years of professional experience, I spotted the crux of the problem. And I paused, my tone filled with confidence. I'm an architect. I can inject entirely new design concepts into Vance Estates and create landmark buildings that will lead the trends of the next decade. I can help Vance Holdings upgrade and transform its brand image. When I finished, the hall was silent. Caldwell and the directors looked at me with uncertainty. They clearly hadn't expected this trophy husband to see the company's issues so clearly. Even Victoria, who hadn't spoken, had a flash of surprise in her eyes. Talk is cheap. Higgins was the first to jump out. Anyone can make empty promises. You say you can, so you can. Why should we believe you? Because of this, I took a thumb drive from my pocket and handed it to the assistant nearby. This is a conceptual design plan I created overnight for the idle plot of land in the East District. I call this project the Nith. I believe it is enough to prove my ability. The assistant plugged the drive into the computer, and a set of stunning blueprints appeared on the projection screen. It was a hypermodern architectural complex, combining ecology, technology, and art. The boldness of the concept and the shock of the visuals made everyone gasp. Even the experienced Arthur Caldwell leaned forward, awe in his eyes. You really did this in one night?" he asked in disbelief. "Yes," I nodded. "This is just a preliminary concept. If you give me a week, I can present a more perfected plan." Caldwell fell silent. He looked at me, his gaze complex. After a long time, he leaned back and sighed. "The younger generation is formidable." He turned to Victoria, his tone much softer. "Victoria, your eye's indeed sharper than us old folks. You chose the right person." In that moment, I clearly saw shock and unwillingness written on Higgins' face. And Victoria, she looked at me, and for the first time, those icy eyes held a ripple of genuine appreciation mixed with curiosity. I won the first battle. I won the preliminary approval of these old foxes, and I want a new look for my nominal wife, Victoria. And this was just the beginning. After the family dinner, my status in the Vance household changed subtly. The directors who were hostile restrained themselves, and Victoria truly began to view me as a partner. She kept her promise. With lightning speed, she passed a resolution through the board to establish an independent design studio for me and handed full responsibility for the East District project to me. My studio was on the 35th floor of the Vance Tower, directly facing Victoria's CEO office. We truly became people who saw each other constantly. The intersection of work increased our communication. I discovered that beneath the Ice Queen exterior, Victoria wasn't as unapproachable as she seemed. She was intensely focused on work and strict but fair. She would argue with me until red in the face over a detail in my blueprints. But she would also have her assistant send hot coffee and late-night snacks when I pulled all-nighters. Our relationship, through day-to-day interaction, evolved from a cold contract into a camaraderie. Meanwhile, the Zenith project was proceeding methodically. Because of its avant-garde design and massive commercial potential, it quickly attracted the attention of the entire industry. Naturally, it also attracted Julian Thorne's attention. At an industry summit, I crossed paths with him and Elena. At the time, I was on stage as a special guest sharing my design philosophy. They were sitting in the front row. Julian's face was dark enough to drip water. And Elena, she looked at me, high-spirited on stage, with eyes as tangled as a mess of yarn. Shock, jealousy, and a trace of regret I could clearly read. From a laughingstock to the Vance son-in-law, then to a star architect. It took me only a month. She probably never imagined that the man she scorned as settling for ordinary would unleash such energy after leaving her. At the cocktail party after the summit, she sought me out. "Caleb, can we talk?" She held a wine glass, speaking cautiously. Gone was the decisiveness. Instead, she looked pitiful. "We have nothing to talk about." My tone was distant. "I know you're still mad at me." She bit her lip, her eyes reddening. "I was wrong that day. I apologize. But I had my reasons." "Reasons?" I sneered. "Your reason was that you couldn't wait to jump into someone else's bed?" "No," she explained hurriedly. "Julian, he promised to help my family. You know, my family's company has been struggling for 2 years. The capital chain was about to break. Julian said if I was with him, the Thorne family would help us weather the storm. So that was it. For money, for family interests, she could betray 5 years of love with a clear conscience. How laughable. So, you treated me as a stepping stone for your wealthy life?" I looked at her, zero warmth in my eyes. No. I have feelings for you." She waved her hands in panic. Enough. I didn't want to hear her excuses. "Elena, put away the pity act. When you made your choice, you should have expected today. You chose the road. Walk it yourself. Don't bother me again." I finished and turned to leave. "Caleb Sterling," she suddenly shouted behind me. "Don't get cocky too early. Do you really think Victoria Vance loves you? She's just using you as a tool to fight the Thorne family. When she's done using you, you'll be kicked to the curb just the same. You and I are exactly the same kind of people." I paused but didn't look back. You and I were never the same kind of people. I dropped the sentence lightly and walked straight to Victoria, who was standing nearby. She was surrounded by business tycoons. Seeing me approach, she naturally took my arm and introduced me to the group. "Gentlemen, let me introduce my husband, Caleb Sterling." At that moment, the look she gave me held a trace of imperceptible tenderness. In the distance, Elena watched our intimacy, her face pale. The glass in her hand slipped, crash, shattering on the floor. I knew I had won this round, but I also knew Elena's vicious curse wasn't baseless. My marriage to Victoria was, fundamentally, a transaction. The fate of a tool is to be used and discarded. That thought was like a thorn quietly embedding itself in my heart. The Zenith project was going smoothly, entering the final preparations before groundbreaking. The entire city was anticipating the rise of this future landmark. Vance Holdings' stock price climbed steadily, and Victoria's position was more secure than ever. Everything seemed to be going well. However, the thorn in my heart grew sharper. Victoria and I were a loving couple in public, perfectly in sync. Back in that empty penthouse, we reverted to familiar strangers. She slept in the master bedroom. I slept in the guest room. Aside from work, we barely spoke. Our marriage was like the Zenith, beautiful on the outside, but the foundation was hollow. I began to feel an inexplicable irritability. This feeling peaked when I noticed some clues. I found that Victoria often stayed in her study alone until late at night. A few times when I got up for water, I saw a light leaking from under her door and heard muffled, painful sobbing. The Ice Queen, always strong in public, was crying secretly. What was she worried about? The company? Or his fake marriage? Even more unsettling, I discovered a member of my core design team acting suspiciously. Ryan Miller, a talented young man I had personally recruited. I noticed he was taking mysterious calls and hanging up immediately when he saw me. Once I caught him sneaking around, copying core data from my computer. I didn't expose him on the spot. I kept my guard up. My gut told me things weren't simple. Julian Thorne lost to me on the Zenith, and given his personality, he wouldn't let it go. He was definitely brewing something. To find the truth, I used Liam's connections to hire a private investigator to check Ryan, and also to check the current status of Julian and Elena. The results came back quickly, and they chilled me to the bone. The detective got photos of Ryan meeting Julian's assistant in a coffee shop. In the photo, the assistant handed Ryan a thick envelope. There was no doubt. Ryan had been bought. He was stealing my designs. The report on Elena struck me like a bolt of lightning. It showed that Elena's family business hadn't received aid from the Thorne family, as she claimed. On the contrary, after she reunited with Julian, her company was acquired by Thorne Enterprises in a hostile takeover at a rock-bottom price. Her father couldn't take the blow and suffered a stroke. He was currently in the hospital, his condition critical. As for Elena herself, after Julian grew tired of her, she was discarded like trash. Her reputation was ruined, and she had nothing. I looked at the photo in the report. Elena looked haggard, her eyes empty, void of her former brilliance. I felt no sympathy, only a creeping horror. Julian Thorne. This man's methods were more vicious and shameless than I imagined. He didn't just play with her feelings. He swallowed her family's assets and pushed her into an abyss. So, buying off Ryan to steal my data, what was that for? Just revenge? No, it couldn't be that simple. A massive conspiracy was taking shape in the shadows. I had to figure out his real objective. Just then, I received a call from Liam. His voice was frantic, panicking like never before. Caleb, it's bad. Something happened. My sister, What happened to her? My heart seized. She collapsed. In the office. She was just rushed to the hospital. The doctor says. Liam's voice cracked, sobbing. The doctor says it's stage 4 gastric cancer. Stage 4 cancer. The words exploded in my brain. I rushed to the hospital. Outside the operating room, Liam was crouched on the floor like a helpless child, holding his head and crying. Seeing me, he jumped up and grabbed my arm, eyes bloodshot. Caleb, what do we do? What about Victoria? My mind went blank. I couldn't connect terminal cancer with the calm, powerful Victoria Vance. No wonder she locked herself in the study. No wonder I heard her crying. She knew. She had kept it from everyone, bearing it alone in silence. I suddenly understood. Why was she in such a rush to find a husband? Why was she desperate to stabilize her position? Why did she hand such a critical project like the Zenith to me? She wasn't using me. She was entrusting me with her legacy. She was looking for a trustworthy heir to protect her brother and the business empire she built. And I was the one she chose. A massive wave of grief and shock drowned me. I always thought we were just a cold transaction. I had been guarding myself, calculating, afraid of being discarded. But I was wrong, dead wrong. This woman shouldered all the storms with her slender frame, yet left her final tenderness and trust to me, a husband she had only known for a few months. The operating light finally turned off. The doctor walked out, removing his mask, looking exhausted. The surgery was successful. The primary tumor was removed. However, the patient's condition is not optimistic. It is terminal. How much time she has left depends on her willpower. Victoria was wheeled out, her face as pale as paper. Lying quietly on the bed, stripped of her dominance and edge, she looked so fragile it hurt to watch. I held her cold hand, my heart in turmoil. From this moment on, I swore. This wasn't about revenge anymore. I was going to protect everything for her. I told Liam to stay at the hospital while I returned to the company. A bold and risky plan had formed in my mind. Julian Thorne. He painstakingly bought off Ryan to steal my data, not just to copy it. With his greed, he wanted more. He wanted to destroy the Zenith, destroy me, and cripple Vance Holdings. Phoenix. I would play along and give him a gift he would never forget. I went back to the studio, pretending to know nothing, keeping Ryan on the core team. But secretly, I buried a Trojan horse in the core design database on my computer. A trap deep enough to doom him and Thorne Enterprises forever. The news of Victoria's illness couldn't be contained. Soon, it spread throughout New York. Vance Holdings' stock plummeted. The board members I had suppressed began to stir again. Thorne Enterprises seized the opportunity, publicly announcing the launch of a new city landmark project, the Nautilus, to challenge the Zenith. They also high-profilely announced that the lead architect of the Nautilus was none other than Elena Cross. The public was in an uproar. Everyone was waiting to see how Elena and I, former lovers, now rivals, would compete. Everyone was watching to see how Vance Holdings, having lost its backbone, would be crushed by Thorne. Even Liam asked me anxiously, Caleb, what do we do? With Victoria down and the company in panic and Julian coming at us. Can we hold on? I patted his shoulder, my eyes steady. Relax. As long as I'm here, the sky won't fall. My calm gave him some comfort, but I knew the decisive moment had arrived. The Thorne launch event was set for a month later. They claimed the design of the Nautilus would be subversive, transcending the era. I laughed coldly. Subversive? Of course, because that design was stolen from me. Except it was the poison version I had modified. During that month, on the surface, I continued with Plan B for the Zenith, a seemingly excellent but much more conservative alternative. In the shadows, I contacted a top IP legal team and an authoritative structural safety assessment agency. I locked down the timestamps and evidence for my original, genuine Zenith drafts, sketches, and data. Simultaneously, I had the detective continue gathering evidence of the transaction between Ryan and the Thorn camp. A dragnet was quietly spreading, waiting for Julian and Elena to step right in. 1 month later, the global launch for Thorn Enterprises' The Nautilus was held as scheduled at the Javits Center. It was a grand spectacle. Julian stood on stage in a bespoke suit, basking in the camera flashes. Elena, wearing a magnificent gown and exquisite makeup, stood beside him as lead architect. She seemed to have regained her former glory. But beneath that shine, I could see the hollowness and numbness in her eyes. She was just a prettier puppet Julian pushed to the front to humiliate me. The presentation began. The massive screen played the animation for the Nautilus. When that familiar, practically identical, architectural model appeared, the audience gasped. The stunning lines, the bold structure, the futuristic concept. It was unmistakably my Zenith. The venue exploded. Plagiarism. That's blatant plagiarism. My God, it's almost exactly the same as Sterling's design. All eyes turned to me in the front row of the VIP section. The cameras swung my way. They wanted to see my reaction, anger, loss of control. But I just sat there quietly, a faint smile on my face. On stage, seeing my reaction, a glint of sadistic pleasure flashed in Julian's eyes. This was what he wanted. He wanted everyone to see that I, Caleb Sterling, was a fraud. He wanted everyone to believe that Vance's project was the copy. He picked up a microphone, addressing the room loudly. I know everyone has questions. You might think the Nautilus looks similar to Vance's project, but I want to say that great minds think alike. Furthermore, his tone sharpened. Truly great design must not only be visible, but must withstand testing. Our design has passed the most authoritative international structural safety assessments. Whereas, to my knowledge, Vance's Zenith has failed safety audits due to fatal structural flaws and is on the verge of being scrapped. His words were a bombshell. Fatal structural flaws. Scrap project. If true, this was a catastrophe for the teetering Vance holdings. Everyone stared at me again, this time with suspicion and pity. Elena looked at me from the stage, her expression complex, mixed with vindication and reluctance. Julian grinned from ear to ear. He thought he had won. However, he didn't know that this was the start of the real show. Mr. Thor makes a good point. I finally stood up, taking a microphone. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly. Great design must withstand testing. I looked at Julian and smiled. But I'm curious, which authoritative international agency conducted your assessment? Care to introduce them? Julian's face stiffened. He hadn't expected the question. His assessment was faked. That involves commercial secrets. No comment, he stalled. Is that so? My smile widened. That's fine. If you won't say it, I will. I snapped my fingers. The doors burst open. A group of uniformed officers, accompanied by 2 lawyers, marched in. The leader flashed his badge. NYPD Financial Crimes Task Force. Julian Thorn, Elena Cross, we suspect you of corporate espionage, intellectual property theft, and fraud. Please come with us. The hall fell deathly silent. Everyone was stunned. Julian's face lost all color. You? On what grounds? This is slander, he shouted, his voice shaking. On these grounds. My lawyer handed a thick stack of files to the police. This is the complete creation record of my client, Mr. Sterling's Zenith project, from concept sketches to final drafts, all with notarized timestamps. This is the evidence of Thorn Enterprises bribing Ryan Miller to steal trade secrets, including bank transfers and surveillance footage. And most importantly, this. My lawyer held up the final document for the press. This is a structural safety risk assessment report from the National Building Safety Center. It clearly states. The lawyer raised his voice. The design for the Nautilus contains a fatal calculation error in the core load-bearing structure. If built, the tower would suffer structural collapse due to metal fatigue within 5 to 10 years. The consequences would be catastrophic. Boom! The venue erupted. If the plagiarism was a moral issue, the fatal flaw was a crime that could kill thousands. Glare stabbed at Julian and Elena like knives. No. Impossible. This is impossible. Julian looked manic, grabbing Elena's arm. It's you. You gave me the blueprints. You said the plans were perfect. Elena was terrified, shaking her head frantically. I didn't know. I don't know anything. Ryan gave me the files. He said it was Caleb's final draft. Even now, they were turning on each other. How pathetic. I watched them, then slowly walked onto the stage and took the microphone. Julian, did you think stealing my design would destroy me? Destroy the Vance family? My voice was ice cold. You were wrong. The blueprints I let you steal were a trap from the very beginning. That fatal flaw was placed there by my own hand, waiting for you to dig your own grave. I knew you bought Ryan. I knew your plot. I played along so you would parade your own crime as a trophy for the world to see. Julian collapsed to the floor, ashen-faced, eyes full of despair and disbelief. He couldn't understand how his meticulous plan became his death warrant. My gaze finally landed on Elena. The woman I once loved was trembling, looking at me like I was a monster. Elena, remember? When you left, you said love isn't something you settle for. I leaned in, whispering in her ear so only she could hear. You were right, but you got one thing wrong. I, Caleb Sterling, am the one thing in my life I refuse to settle for. And you? For your so-called future. You threw away the most precious thing. Now, you and your future can go to hell together. I straightened up and didn't spare her another glance. I turned and walked off the stage. Behind me were the pathetic figures of Julian and Elena being led away by police. The flashing cameras. The noise of the world. But inside I was calm. The revenge drama was finally over. Thorne Enterprises collapsed instantly under the scandal. Stock crashed, partners bailed, banks called in loans. They declared bankruptcy. Julian and Elena, due to the massive amount involved and the malicious nature of the crime, were sentenced to over 10 years in prison. Ryan, as a witness, also received his punishment. Everyone who betrayed and hurt me paid the heaviest price. As for Vance Holdings under my stewardship, it didn't fall. Instead, because of the uniqueness of the Zenith, its reputation soared, becoming the undisputed leader in New York. I visited Elena once in prison. Through the thick glass, wearing a jumpsuit, hair cut short, she looked haggard and old. She looked at me, eyes hollow, muttering, I was wrong. I was really wrong. I didn't speak. I just looked at her for a moment, then turned and left. I had no hate for her, no love, just total indifference. The greatest revenge wasn't making her suffer, but erasing her completely from my world. 1 year later, early spring. In the rooftop garden of the hospital, the sun was shining. Victoria sat in a wheelchair, a thin blanket over her lap. Although pale, her spirit was much better. After a year of targeted therapy and care, her condition had miraculously stabilized. The doctor called it a medical miracle. I pushed her slowly through the garden. The Zenith topped out last week. I told her softly, I saw the news. Her voice was quiet but smiling. It's beautiful. More beautiful than I imagined. When you're discharged, I'll take you to the top to see the view. Okay. She nodded, then turned her head to look at me. Those once icy eyes were now filled with gentle starlight. Caleb, our agreement. It seems to have expired. My heart skipped a beat. Yes, the 1-year contract. It had passed without me noticing. I looked at her and seriously took a small box from my pocket. Inside was a ring. Not a massive diamond, but a platinum band designed in the spiraling shape of the Zenith, delicate and unique. I designed and made it myself. Victoria, I kneeled on one knee, just like a year ago, but my heart felt worlds apart. A year ago, I thought I lost everything. But now I know when God closes a door, he opens a window. You are my window. You show me a different view and made me a better version of myself. I don't know when we change from a transaction to something real. I just know that the current me wants to protect you for the rest of my life. So, Victoria Vance, are you willing to give me all your remaining time and let me be your real, permanent husband? In the sunlight, her eyes grew red. She smiled, tears falling. Then, she reached out her hand to me firmly. Edo.